Hi everyone, it's Catherine and Paul with the Scutz Orchard, and we were wanting to share about installing the electric at our greenhouse. So our goal was to have power at the greenhouse for all the various things that you need power for. And we had intended to put a panel in the greenhouse and install the outlets and things using weatherproof conduit. When we put together some of the initial costs, we thought that it would be reasonable to have a budget of about $1,000 to $1,200 for this space.
And like most budgets, they grow a little bit because our original plan was to actually pull power from our main pole because it was a shorter distance away. However, there wasn't going to be enough space in that panel, so we needed to go about twice as far to the shop. Thankfully, though, it was pretty much a straight run.
Once we had decided the path for our electrical, we were able to reach out to a trencher. The trencher we used for this particular run was the same trencher we used last year when we did our electrical work. And we decided to share some of the expenses of what it took to run the electrical from one building to the other. So we have the cost for the trenching itself, which was about $2 a foot. The wire was about $3 a foot. The conduit ran about $25 per 10-foot section. And then we had various fittings that went along with it as well.
And we had some surprises along the way, like concrete that was about a foot below the ground surface. Thankfully, we had the right tools for the job, and so we were able to score it, cut it, and then take an impact hammer to break it up so that we could remove the rest of it by hand.
Once we had gotten the trench all dug out, it was time to assemble the wire and the pipe. So we threaded the wire through each section of pipe, and once we had all of the pieces in place, we were able to glue them together. And this part of the project took about a day. And of course, I had to schedule time for kitten breaks. It's very important.
And the weather was mostly good for being November, December timeframe in Iowa. Although we did have some really windy days that would actually take some corn husks from around our property and blow them into the trench. Plus also the wind could blow some of the dirt itself back in. So before we dropped the pipe in, we had to go ahead and make sure that the trench was cleared and ready to go because it needed to be approximately 32 inches deep.
Like most projects, there are challenges along the way. Cats were actually one of our biggest problems. The kittens loved playing in the trench. And one example, thing one was playing around me, and she had been in the trench and decided to climb out vertically and knocked about a foot of dirt right back into the trench in an area I had just finished digging out. So, the cats were a problem. We also had the surprise concrete, the cold from the winter. We had windy weather, like 25 to 30 mile an hour wind gusts. We had some supply chain issues getting materials on site. We also had some scheduling issues with our trades. Probably our biggest frustration was that our trencher was a no-show on the first day that we had planned for them to arrive. And it was frustrating because we had extra hands available that particular day. And because they didn't show up on the day they had planned for, it put us behind by about a week because we had to do a lot of work by ourselves.
But thankfully, we eventually got to the point where we could drop the pipe in again about 32 inches down. And after that was the fun part of getting to borrow our neighbor's skid steer and be able to make quick work of putting the dirt back into the trench.
After we got done with all of the outdoor work of burying the electrical and placing it at the two buildings, then we could turn our focus to placing the electrical on the interior of the building. And you can see the newly installed shelving was used to organize all of the small bits and pieces of our electrical. There's a lot of pieces that go into placing electrical, so I'm not going to list them all out, but you can see an image here. There were gang boxes, there were PVC couplings, circuit breakers, covers, all of it. And there was a lot of odds and ends to make this work.
And we wanted to show some example costs of what we were looking at and working with. So then that way, if you're planning to take something like this on, you can understand some of that as well. And again, we were able to leverage our contractor and electrician to be able to make sure that we were getting the correct equipment for this project.
We also wanted to share what our electrical panel looked like. One of the cost-saving measures that we did for this space, we piped everything in as if we needed weatherproof materials. And so that required making sure that we use GFCI at the outlet access points. And instead of using individual GFCI outlets for our main outlet access, we used GFCI circuit breaker for the outlets so that we didn't have to purchase those individually. And by doing the circuit breaker versus outlets, it saved us about $30 on that specific part of the project. Whereas the ventilation fan, it was a single outlet on its own line, and we used a GFCI outlet for that specific outlet or circuit breaker.
Now let there be light. It was an exciting moment to finally be able to turn the breakers on and put in some high lumen LED bulbs that fan out and be able to really illuminate the space beautifully.
So as we're wrapping up, I figured we'd show you a video tour of the electrical in the space. You can see the outlets that run along the knee wall, and this particular wall is where I'm planning to have my potting shed table, and this is also the wall where the ventilation fan will be installed. And then the electrical continues to run, and this is now the south-facing wall, and we have electrical outlets on the south-facing wall as well.
As well as then going up, again, you get a nice view of the 3 different lights that provide more than enough illumination for the space. Oh yeah, who's that guy?
Who's that? I don't know.
And then we can see what the outlets are that we were working with. Again, we chose not to use GFCIs down below, but the GFCI breaker, as well as then this is the outlet cover that we'll use for connecting our ventilation fan and being able to have a cord run through it while it's still protected.
So this is a picture of our very first evening with power at the greenhouse, and we thought it was more impactful to share a photo of the greenhouse at night. You can see how well lit the space is, and we're very excited for it to now be live and with power access directly available at the greenhouse.
And thank you for joining us for the video here. We hope you've enjoyed it. Feel free to like and subscribe if you want to continue to see more content from what we are doing around our property, as well as other travels that we are going to take or have taken in times past. So thank you for joining, and hopefully you enjoyed. Feel free to add any comments or questions down below if you'd like to continue on in the conversation.